Yeah, I would say if you're doing something that scares you, you know that you're on the right path and you're growing. Because I think I look back and all the times where I've made big leaps of progress are times when I was really scared. Like when I bought that first house for 17K, I was so anxious I couldn't sleep for like 2 days because, my first deal, if I lost the money, I lose my friend's money. So couldn't sleep at night. But that first deal, set the trajectory for my real estate investing. Same thing when I bought that first apartment complex, and anything that was a major or big step in my real estate career was a lot of fear. But looking back, it helped me grow exponentially after that event or that thing had passed.
Welcome, millionaires and future millionaires. You're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, a show where you'll hear the stories and interviews of everyday millionaires. We'll unveil their decisions, their strategies, and their portfolio allocation. Now to your host, Jace Mattinson.
Welcome back to another episode of Millionaires Unveiled podcast. This is episode number 398. Man, we got so much going on in the world today. It's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out financially on the global front and the personal front. But today we've got an episode with Adriel. He's got a net worth of 1.8-ish to 2.2. A little bit of variation there depending on how some of his assets are valued. He's young. He's in his early 30s. And a good chunk of his net worth is in real estate at this point. He started out, believe it or not, umpiring baseball, moved into a professional career in engineering in the petroleum space as we get into a long discussion with him about that, and moved into investing in real estate full time. So quite the journey that he's been on. We talk about all sorts of hacks that he did to get there in his young years. And going to be a great episode. If you'd like to be on the show, send us an email, millionairesunveiled@gmail.com. Got a couple great ones coming up. Episode 400 that will feature a billionaire. Can't wait for that one. And got a couple other surprises dropping here soon as far as the episode goes. And yes, I will jump in soon. I know we've had a few requests between YouTube and iTunes and some of the other places that people leave reviews about getting an update and what I do and how I think about finances. So it's probably time. I know I've had a few requests, a couple of emails that came in as well. We'll be doing that one soon. I'll be turning 37 here in April, so maybe it's time for an update. We'll get into the details and the weeds of that. So be looking forward to those. But we've got plenty of professions out there that have not been represented. We have not seen very many federal employees, which we've had a few people write in about recently with all the headlines around federal employees. So if that's you, shoot us an email. We'd love to have you on the show. There's definitely got to be some out there that are millionaires. And really any type of government employee, whether it's local, regional, or state level, I should say, or federal, would love to have you on the show. We've not featured very many of those, but there are several professions, and I've started making a list actually to see which ones we need to try to hunt down and feature. And there's a couple states out there that we only have representatives of one or two people that have ever been on. So, or zero in a couple cases. So we're going to try to change that as well. We have listeners in over 100 countries now in every state. So we should have some representatives that are millionaires that will share their story. And without any further ado, let's get right in the episode with Adriel. Adriel, do you want to just give us about your background and what you're up to now?
Yes, so I'm Adriel. I'm 32 years old and I live in Houston, Texas, originally from California. And currently I'm a full-time real estate investor. I graduated college with an engineering degree, actually. Worked a 9-to-5 in engineering, did real estate as a side hustle, and now transitioned full-time.
So we've got another one moving. They're moved from California to Texas. How long ago did you move?
Well, so I left California once I graduated high school, and I went to Georgia Tech. And then after college, I ended up in Texas because that's where, all the jobs were, and just never left since.
Okay. I gotcha. Makes sense. So cross country move for college. So I can't wait to get a little bit more into the detail of your story, going from engineering to full time real estate investor. But before we jump into all that, what's your net worth today?
It fluctuates with real estate, considering the values are subjective. It's around, I'd say, about 2.3. When I last had official appraisals and whatnot, but with the current market, because commercial real estate has taken a hit, I'd say probably down to 1.8 ish.
Okay, so fluctuating between 1.8, 2.2.
Right.
What is the makeup of, let's just call it 2.2 for easy math. What's the makeup there?
I'd say about 110K is the solo 401k, but that's just reinvested back into passive syndication. So basically, it's still real estate. And then I have another 50K in more syndications, more real estate. And then cash wise, about 185,000. A lot of that's not really, I consider touchable cash. A lot of it's reserves for properties. And then personal residents have equity of about 90,000. The real estate equity, about, I'd say, anywhere from 1.7 to 2 million, right? Depending on the valuations. And then really that's about it. Maybe 15,000 in my two cars, and then about 80K in Bitcoin. And that's about it.
Nice. So for a real estate investor, you actually have quite the diversification. Obviously, a large lion's share is directly invested in real estate,
Right.
hard assets, not necessarily syndications or through other people. So of that piece that makes up a lion's share, is that, I mean, break down kind of the asset classes within real estate that comprises of. I mean, do you have single families? There's some commercial you mentioned in there.
Right.
What does that look like?
Yeah. So it's a mix of multifamily, single family, some land that's in the process of development is still raw land. And then I have a property out in Mexico that's an outlier, like a vacation rental. And yeah, that's basically it. Single families, multifamilies, and a short term rental.
And did you start with the single family rental as your first one, or walk us through kind of deal by deal if you
Yeah.
don't mind? Getting, how did you kind of evolve to get to the commercial and vacation rental and whatnot?
Right. So fresh out of college, I got a job offer with Shell, and the only opening they had for me was in Port Arthur, Texas. It's about hour and a half east of Beaumont, Texas, kind of by the Texas-Louisiana border. And I figured, okay, well, first job, I can't really be too picky, right? So I just took the offer, and it's oil and gas, so it's pretty decent pay. And then out there is when I started looking at side hustles. I knew I didn't want to do my 9 to 5 the whole time. I looked at a lot of things, e-commerce, drop shipping, stuff like that, and end up on real estate because it just made sense. It's very simple, like the formula, right? Buy it for this amount, put in this amount for rehab, it's worth Z amount. So I figured, okay, that can't be too difficult. It's pretty simple. And then in 2016, I bought my first real estate property, a full gut renovation single family home. I bought it for $17,000. And that's the rest is history after that.
$17,000. Was that nearby where you were working?
Yeah. So the thing I learned, I was listening to podcasts like Bigger Pockets and whatnot, and they always said start out in your own backyard, right? Because you know the market, you can control it. And I'd actually been spending money on off market deals because that's what made sense to me is, hey, don't buy something on the market for market value. You need to get a discount to get a deal. So I was actually spending about $1,000 a month in direct mail marketing for about 6 months. No deals came through. And I was at the same time going networking. I was going to real estate meetups, and I ended up buying a deal from a wholesaler. And for those of you that don't know, that's someone that kind of gets a property under contract and sells it for a higher price, like a middleman. And I met them for this meetup, and he finally brought me a deal 6 months later, and I said, I'll buy it. That was the $17,000 house. He actually got it under contract for $10,000, and he sold it to me for $17,000, and he made $7,000.
And so did you pay cash for that, I'm assuming?
Yes. So obviously it was a cash deal. A lot of times these wholesalers won't wait for you to, get a loan. And for me, since I started my W-2 job, and although it was, a pretty well-paying job, I was still, I guess, cash poor at the time. So what I did was I called up my two best friends who had been working maybe a couple years more in the workforce out of college because I graduated a year later because I was doing some internships. And basically I was like, hey, if you guys toss me $10,000 each, I'll give you a 30% return on your money. So that 20K was enough to pay for the house with closing costs, was just under 20K.
So that first deal that you did, you didn't put any money of your own in it.
Well, I did once because it was a full gut renovation. So when the renovation part came around, I was maxing out my credit cards, using my leftover paychecks from work and all that. But for, I guess, the initial purchase, you can say no.
Okay. So how much did you end up spending on the renovation then?
Yeah, so that was costly because, first deal, and it was a full. People would have thought it would be a teardown, and looking back now, it probably should have been a teardown, but I just decided to go all in, and I spent about $75,000 on the renovation. It needed anything you can think of. It needed. That's why it was so cheap.
And you didn't have that money except for loading it up on credit cards, pouring a little bit from your paychecks. I mean, a lot of that was basically financed from your pocket in a way, but wasn't in your pocket.
Right. Well, at the time, this was in summer of 2016. So at the time, BBVA was doing personal unsecured loans at a 7% interest rate. So I walked into BBVA and said, "Hey, I'm looking for a loan." Luckily, I had, the high paying W-2 job and then good credit score, but they were able to loan me $40,000 unsecured at a 7% interest rate. So that 40 grand was the lion's share of the renovation costs and materials. And then the rest was, maxing out credit cards, paycheck money, etc.
Wow. So pretty scrappy to get this first deal, to take
Yes.
the risk. You call it your 95. How long did it take from the time you bought that to do the renovation?
Man, I think I would say it took about 5 months. And, as anyone in real estate, you're going to make a lot of mistakes because you don't know what you don't know. Bad contractors, etc. It should have really been a $75,000 renovation, but bad contractors, ran it up to 95.
So you're all in 100 grand almost.
Yeah.
Are you able to cash that out and refi, or do you have to put a renter in first, or kind of walk us through that next piece of the process? 5 months in, 6 months in, when you're
Right.
starting to get some of that money back.
Yeah. So, like I said, when I was learning, I was listening a lot to Bigger Pockets. And at the time, they were always preaching the BRRRR strategy, where you buy, rehab, rent, and refinance. So I thought that was my plan going in. So once I finished it, I was able to refinance with a local credit union. And the reason I did a local credit union versus a traditional mortgage broker or bank is because they don't have a seasoning requirement where you have to own the property for a certain amount of time before you can refinance. So you can refinance it right away. And that's what I did. They would give me 80% of the appraised value. And luckily, it appraised out to 135,000, I believe. So I was able to basically pull out almost all my money and be in no money out of pocket.
And was it cash flowing once you put a renter in there as well?
Yeah, so I rented it. I think at the time was $1,200, and it was cash flowing. Yeah, it was cash flowing about, say, about $150 a month, and that's with underwriting capex reserves and extra repairs and maintenance. Which that's what I learned from Bigger Pockets. You always want to underwrite all those things, but I didn't realize once you fully renovate a house, your maintenance costs would be a lot lower than what you are underwriting for because everything's brand new.
So I'm curious at this point, did you went and paid back your friends, I'm assuming. Did you go pay off that loan with
Right.
BBVA as well?
Right. So paid off the BBVA loan with the refinance money, paid off my friends with their interests. So my only out of pocket wasn't that much, but it was just from basically what I had from the paychecks. I paid off all the credit cards as well, as you don't want to carry a balance on the credit cards. So yeah, that refinance really was the cash out that paid everyone back, paid everything off, and got me to debt free minus the mortgage.
And were you renting a place while you were doing all this, or did you buy another one with FHA or something?
Yeah, so I was renting at the time. I was renting an apartment, and then I'd switched to renting a room from a coworker at their house. So I was just renting the whole time I was doing this.
All right, now take us to the next deal. So 5-6 months in, you've got this one on, rocking and rolling. What does it look like going to the next one and the next one?
Yeah, so the first deal is the biggest hurdle mentally and financially. And once you do it, you kind of have the mental fortitude to say, hey, it's not this scary, outlandish process. It's doable. I've done it. So now let's go and repeat it. So I ended up finding a house that was listed on the market on the MLS, which is, I normally don't buy it on market, but I don't remember exactly what was happening, but only personal residents or homeowners could purchase or bid on it the first 14 days before investors could make offers. I don't recall why or what the thing was, so that's what my realtor told me. And I figured, well, I was going to flip it, but hey, let me just buy it as a personal residence. And that's what I did. In order to bypass that 14-day wait period, I said, I'll just buy this as a personal home, renovate it, and then just live in it myself. So that was the next deal, was that.
So you did a live-in renovation then with number 2?
Right. Well, I didn't live in it yet. I was going to rehab first and then move in. So that's the only requirement to end up, living in the property
I
and
see.
just not use it as an investment property. So I was still renting the room at my coworker's house and renovating it. And then after it got finished is when I moved in.
And how long did that one take in?
That one was quicker. It wasn't as bad of a rehab. It was still pretty much a full cosmetic rehab, but the roof didn't need to be changed or like the plumbing. So that one took about 2.5 months, I'd say, to renovate.
Okay, so in year one, you've got two properties under your belt. One you live in, one that's a rental, two that you've renovated. Walk us through kind of the next escalator, if you will, and then at what point did you walk away from your engineering job?
Right. So I moved into that second home once it was done, and it was actually a 4 bed, 4 bed, 2 bath house, about 1,800 square feet. And I was, single. I didn't need all that space. So one of them I turned into my office, home office, and I rented out the other 2 rooms for like $500 a month, all bills paid. So that helped actually cover basically my mortgage, taxes, and insurance while I was living there. So it was house hacking, but renting out by the room instead of renting a duplex or triplex and house hacking that way. And the whole time that was going on the first deal I did, the first tenants, they ended up moving out after like a month in. Their job relocated them. And then I was like, man, leasing up a unit is the most time consuming and annoying part of rental real estate. And since, it was just my one property, I didn't have a property manager because I was being cheap at the time, just spending my days going there, showing it. People will flake and not show up. That's when I realized, hey, all this work is not worth $150 a month in cash flow. Little at the time, I didn't think about appreciation because if you listen to all the podcasts, they say, hey, don't buy for appreciation. That's just a bonus if it happens. Only buy for cash flow. So I said, man, I'm done with rentals. Let me just flip. Because if I can make a 30K on a flip, it'll take me way too long on a rental to get that much money back out. Which, at the time, in hindsight, I didn't think appreciation would shoot up the way it did in 17, 18, 19 and COVID. But yeah, so after that, I pivoted to flipping and wholesaling mainly for my real estate.
And did you walk away from your job in that second year?
No, so I actually stayed in my job until 2021. So I started in 2016 when I started my day job and I started doing real estate as a side hustle. So I worked my day job for 5.5 years while doing real estate as my second full-time job, if you will, on nights and weekends. And it was mainly just flipping and wholesaling houses at that point. And then in 2018, I bought my first apartment complex. I bought a 14-unit apartment complex. No investors, just myself, all the money saved from the flipping. And got a loan from the local credit union again, 20% down payment. And I purchased it at $630,000. So I came out of pocket about, what is 20% of that? About 150-ish, more or less. And then just kept going, kept flipping, and then purchased more properties along the way until 2020 was a big year. I purchased a 32-unit apartment complex right before the pandemic hit. And then near the tail end of the year, I purchased a 21-unit apartment complex. And then in 2021, when the market got red hot, that's when I decided to quit my full-time job.
And in 2020, I guess 21, did you continue to buy kind of multi-unit, small multifamily properties?
No, so in 2021, that's when multifamily was getting red hot and the prices were just didn't make any sense at that time, for me at least, to purchase. So my last purchase was in 2020, and that 21-unit apartment complex was actually a full gut renovation on 21 units. So that took me a year and a half to renovate. So I was kind of just tied up with that as well. So didn't really have the energy or the time to go search out any more deals after that one was closed on.
And were all these multi ones nearby where you live too?
So I was still living near Beaumont, Port Arthur at the time, and the first one was right by where I lived, like 5 minutes from where I lived. The second one, same thing, but the third one was actually in Houston, and at the time I was still living out near Beaumont, Port Arthur, so an hour and a half. So it's not exactly local, but it's not too far. And then now I've moved out to Houston, so now my other two are far away from me, and I'm close to the 21-unit one now.
So total at this point, how many doors do you have?
So that would be those three to combine. So 14, 32, and 21 was at 65-ish doors. And then I had a handful of single family rentals at this point back in 2021. But for two of the apartment complexes, the 32 unit and the 21 unit, I had partners on the deal. it was a joint venture, so it's not 100% owned by me. But the rest was basically all like the single family rentals, etc., was 100% owned by me.
In business, hiring the right people quickly is everything. I've learned firsthand how crucial it is to bring on the right team, especially when you need someone yesterday. And when it comes to finding great talent fast, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post screen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs ads help you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your ideal candidates, so you can reach the right people faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored job posts posted directly on Indeed get 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. One of the things I love about Indeed is how fast and easy it makes hiring. I've been through the slow, frustrating hiring process before, and I'd wish I had used Indeed from the start. It would have saved me time, money, and a whole lot of stress. Plus, with Indeed sponsored jobs, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. And if you want it fast, get this. In the minute I've been talking, 23 hires have been made on Indeed worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring now with Indeed. As a listener of Millionaires Unveiled, you'll get a $75 sponsored job credit to give your job posting more visibility at Indeed.com/unveiled. Just go to Indeed.com right now /unveiled right now. And by using our link, you'll also be supporting the show. That's Indeed.com/unveiled. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. And thanks to Indeed for supporting today's episode. And did you continue to do some deals into 21, 22, 23, or was it just focusing on that kind of renovation? Prices were getting too high. We'll just kind of sit on this cash flow and wait?
Yeah, so the whole time from 2017 till now, I've still consistently flipping or wholesaling deals, single family deals, as that's kind of like, I would say, the cash flow of the business, because the renovation of that project took, a year and a half before any sort of tenants were even put in place in the property. And the whole time you're paying, interest on loans, etc. So yeah, the whole time I'm still wholesaling and flipping houses, and that's kind of more automated. So I was spending more time on the multifamily, and so I was still picking up deals in the sense of single family, but nothing commercial or like that during that time period.
How did it come about that you got a vacation rental down south? And when was
Well,
that?
so I was actually at a hotel in Tulum. I visited once. So, I also did a little bit videography, photography when I travel. That's more of like a hobby, passion, nothing paid. But I did get some like collaborations, if you will, where they'll let me stay for free if I, shoot them a small video, some photos of the property. And I had done one for a hotel in Tulum in 2020, September 2020 is when I went there, because they were like the only place really open during the pandemic for traveling. And then I ended up back. They invited me back a year later in 2021 to film more content of their hotel. And that's when they approached me. Someone that worked there, the same developers that built that hotel, were building villas, like short-term rental or vacation home villas, and asked if I was interested in buying one. And I toyed with the idea. I was like, man, do I want to tie up money here? Because in Mexico, it's basically an all-cash real estate market. Financing, debt is really not prevalent, even for locals. So it would have to be an all-cash deal. And it was pre-construction sale. So it kind of pre-sale in Mexico. They have a development. They tell you, hey, this is development. We're going to start building it soon. But we have to either buy it now, or at least put in a down payment now. So I went back and forth. And at the time, when I ran the numbers, Tulum was, I would say, at its height during the pandemic, because they were the only place open that the prices were crazy. I'm talking high season in the wintertime. These villas would rent for $800 a night to $1,000 a night. So at the time when I did my underwriting, I was like, man, this is really good, cash on cash return. And that's when I decided with my two friends, the same two that gave me that first $10,000 each in 2016, we decided, hey, let's just go in and buy this villa in Tulum. And that's how I ended up with a property in Mexico.
Wow. So you pay cash for this. And then, I mean, obviously you're remote from a management standpoint.
Right.
Is it still doing what you thought it would, or has that changed?
It's definitely changed. So Tulum has definitely slowed down quite a bit from its peak in 2021. One is now, the rest of the world is back open and normal, that tourism is spread out again. And two, there was a lot of development because it got hot. So everyone started building and developing. So the supply shot up while the demand went down. It's doing okay. And I mean, there's no debt on it, right? So there's technically cash flows no matter what. It was more of it wasn't for purely investment, right? I knew the numbers were not going to be that great. It was more of a speculation gamble play where the reason real estate in the US is so expensive is because everyone's leveraged, right? You get mortgages, you get debt, 5% down. That's why you can buy $600,000, $700,000 homes on relatively modest salaries. And while Mexico is a pure cash play for now, there is, even when I first put the down payment down, there were some options for financing for foreigners. But, it was crazy high interest rates, high down payments, talking double-digit interest rates. So it wasn't too feasible. But the idea is it's continuing to get better and there's continuing to be more demand from foreign investments in Mexico that if they finally introduce better debt into the marketplace, then you would assume that the real estate values would start shooting up because now you can finance a big chunk or big portion of the property. So instead of having to pay cash, 400, 500K, you can pay, 50K, 100K down payment and finance the rest. And hopefully that will jump property values up. So it's more of a long-term speculation play, but it's still, making some money in the meantime, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So talk to us a little bit about some of these other investments. Obviously, you had a W-2 job working in a large oil company,
Right.
but I feel like a lot of real estate investors that come on the show and that we talk to, they're 100% kind of real estate only. That's their only asset class. That's what they believe in. That's what they do. You have a portfolio that one has got quite a bit of crypto in it, which I bet is somewhat related to your age generation and whatnot. But I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that. And then also having, pieces that are not part of your real estate that, effectively are in the market.
Yeah, so that's very true. When someone's in real estate, it's almost all real estate. And I'd say, my portfolio is pretty similar. The Bitcoin I do have is because back in 2020, I purchased it back when it was 18,000. I just put in 20 grand. So I purchased like a little over one Bitcoin and it's just been sitting there since. And obviously now it's taken off. At the time of this recording, it's like 96,000. And actually, I'd say 2-3 weeks ago, I actually sold off a quarter of a Bitcoin to recoup my 20K basically. I said, all right, I've been in this 4 years. Let me just pull out, I think it was like $24,000 just so now I'm playing with house money for the rest of my Bitcoin. So I technically should have about 100K plus in Bitcoin, but now down to 81 because I cashed out a small portion of it to recruit my investment. So that's that. I don't plan on really selling it or doing much with it. I'm just going to let it sit and ride and just hope it keeps shooting up 10, 20 years down the road. There's no need for the money. And I didn't even need to cash it out. I just wanted to say, okay, in case it does say crash to zero, at least I'm not at a loss at this point. And then, the cash, like I said, even though it's considered cash, I still tie it to the real estate because those funds are all split up as reserves for each property. So like the 32 unit property has some reserves, right? About 70, 80 grand in reserves. And all of it's just in case, worst case scenario, right? I like to be conservative. Half the building gets evicted or can't pay rent. I can still cover the mortgage, cover the expenses for at least 3 months is kind of the amount of reserves I like to keep in the bank account.
You still have some in the market too, though, correct? Like 401k
Uh,
or whatever? Or did you cash
yeah,
that out as well?
yeah. So I have a solo 401k. So when I had my day job, I had the 401k obviously, and I wasn't really contributing much to it. I just like put the bare minimum to match the employer match, and I was just dumping everything into real estate. Which looking back now, I wish I put more in the 401k, but that's hindsight. And then that's in about 2019. I actually took a look at my 401k because I just never looked at it. I was like, oh, I got like 20, 30K to play with, and I was buying stocks. I bought Tesla before it shot up. So I was doing a little bit of just like stock picking in the 401k, which was great because all those was tax free. Even though when Tesla shot up a lot and I sold it, but eventually when I quit my job, I had to roll it over to a solo 401k, and after that, I ended up investing that 110,000 back into real estate syndications. So it's still technically now in real estate.
Okay, so you've kept it inside of that vehicle. You've just
Right.
reallocated it now into real estate.
Right. Because during my employment, I was only given the options that, my employer gave, which was stocks. And then now that it came into the solo 401k, I said, all right, let me put it back into real estate.
You said something real interesting about hindsight, wishing you would have put more in there. Talk to us a little bit about that now that you're, a decade into this real estate investment journey.
Right. So at the time, I was like, man, I can put in this 401k, but these, blended funds from Vanguard or whatnot that your employer can let you choose are targeting 7-8% return. I was like, if I just take that extra money and I put it into my flips where I'm making, $15,000 to $45,000 a flip on these smaller homes, I'm getting way more return and I'm controlling my money. But little did I know that the stock market will go crazy post pandemic, and I could have bought more Tesla or more whatever stocks I had at the time and be tax free on those. And then I would have had, 2 or 3 times more in the solo 401k that could end up throwing back into real estate. But I just wish I put more into it. Good thing I put enough to match my employer match, but I should have been maxing it out every year. And that way, the stocks I did have, I would have made way more money. Because I think in 2021, even though real estate was hot, I think stocks did end up outperforming real estate that year.
If you would have had more in that account, you think you would have been willing to possibly self-direct some into some of those flips and utilize those retirement kind of tax advantaged accounts a little bit to play with in that regard? Or that would have been too risky for you?
Like during my employment or after I quit and moved it to... So at the time...
After, since you kind of, you would have had to roll it over, but I'm just curious because, I've heard a few real estate investors doing this, but I've heard a lot of them kind of take the route that you've taken and say, well, I'm going to go put this into syndications from a self-directed standpoint instead of into my other flips, because I feel like I'm combining too much risk in a way.
For me, it was because what I understood was it had to be an arm's length transaction on what I invested in. And my understanding of it was I couldn't invest into my own deals because I was involved in the deal. I mean, I may be wrong, but that's how I interpret it as. I would prefer to invest in my own deals because I control everything I do. But I think the reason, this was several years ago when I dumped it into a syndication, was because it had to be just completely third party.
Yeah, no, I think you're correct in some of those rules, but there are some loopholes, so to speak.
Gotcha.
I mean, this is how people like, Peter Thiel and Mitt Romney get, hundreds of millions of dollars in their self-directed, Roth IRAs that's all tax-free, is because they, effectively through these loopholes investing in, private equity or whatever it might be. So there's fund structures that I've heard people talk about. I haven't participated in any myself, so to speak, but
gotcha.
I know they're out there. And I'm always curious to, specifically with flippers, knowing that like at some point you get so good at kind of running the math, running the numbers, understanding the economics of the deal of like, hey, should I have done this like this instead of been paying some of these tax bills that,
Right.
come from high rates of flipping and high income from flipping.
Right. I'll have to look more into that. Luckily, the multifamilies, the depreciation on those kind of offset some of the flipping income. But yeah, it's not many ways around flipping or wholesaling in terms of those taxes.
For sure. So let's shift gears a little bit. What does the future hold? I mean, do you try to get to a certain net worth or a certain amount of doors, or what is the outlook for you, going forward here?
Yeah, so it's complicated, right? So at least here in the Houston market, which is very particular, multifamily has been pretty bad, I'd say the last 2 years. So commercial overall has been bad with the whole interest rate hikes, but Houston in particular has had an oversupply of multifamily being built the last few years. So there's too many apartments here in Houston. And the oversupply has really caused rent decrease in the market instead of rent growth. And considering multifamilies are valued based on the income and expenses, your income isn't growing anymore. So you're really losing value, losing equity in your deals as time goes on, because it's just a bad cycle of the market for Houston. Obviously, you're not going to take the loss until you sell. So I'm just holding tight on all my properties right now, hoping for the interest rates to drop and hoping for rents to go back up. But I am not actively looking for multifamily, at least not in the Gulf area, because one, insurance rates have been jumping double digits annually due to all the storms, all the hurricanes, and a lot of carriers are pulling out of the Gulf Coast area. So, and then property taxes in Texas have, as you know, been shooting up quite a bit as well, double digit every year. So it's kind of, you're losing equity, you're losing value on your multifamily in Houston because your rents aren't growing up to keep up with the expenses. So right now I'm just, got the cash reserves holding tight until it turns around before, I buy more or I sell. And then another thing I look at is the whole supply and demand as a whole. I mean, I know Elon Musk has talked about it, Jack Ma. The world, more or less, the civilized world is in population decline right now. a lot of, younger people are not having kids. A lot of millennials are not having kids or delaying having kids. And basically population growth is declining. And I'm thinking long term, maybe not in our lifetimes, but maybe our grandkids' lifetimes. I think the supply and demand for housing is going to inverse. Right now, there's a shortage of housing and not enough supply. So that's what's keeping prices high on single family, even with the high rates. But I'm thinking, everyone always said, oh, real estate's generational wealth, generational wealth. I don't think so going forward in the future. Historically, the past several hundred years, yes. But if population is going to keep declining, like, the statistics are saying it is, and we're still building more houses, building more apartments, eventually a lot of areas are going to have a big shock in prices when the supply is outpacing the demand. So I don't know if I want to keep holding that many properties or if I want to pivot. I would say certain markets, major urban cities, are still always going to do well, but I've already seen it happen in more rural areas like, for example, Beaumont, Texas, right? I lived there for 6 years, so I know the market pretty well. That market's never really appreciated. It's always been a steady cash flow market, but the population is declining out there. So that's just something to keep in mind for people in real estate is long term, if you're talking, passing on stuff to your kids, it may not always go up in value. So that's why on terms of buying and holding more, unless it's a crazy good deal, of course I'll buy and hold it. But even then, it would probably have a life cycle of 3 to 7 years before I sell.
That's an interesting take. Do you have a target net worth to get to or maybe what do you shift to if it's not real estate?
Target net worth, I mean, ideally 10 mil is kind of, I think most people are targeting. I think that's the new, millionaire, back when everyone thought a millionaire was super rich, when nowadays it's kind of middle class to say. So I say 10 mil is kind of the new goal. In terms of shifting, I don't know. I'm just not sure. Everything is kind of up in the air with the economy at this point. I mean, real estate, I'd say it's still a safe bet. And I say it's not going to be in our lifetime probably where it's going to severely crash, I would say. But that's why I diversify in my real estate itself, right? I have multifamily, single family property internationally, etc. But no, I think I still always do real estate. I think no matter, even if values tank, when you're flipping or wholesaling, it doesn't matter what the market is because the whole point, you're still getting it at a discount and then reselling it. So even though houses are now worth half of what they were, let's say the market crashes, I'll just be getting it for 70% of what half the value is. So I think the active side, the active income of the business won't really ever change because you can always still make money no matter what happens to the values. I think it's more in the long-term holds that will get affected.
Awesome. Well, let's wrap up with some rapid fire questions. What's the most expensive pair of shoes or pants that you purchased?
Shoes, I'd say I got like a pair of boots for $150, $200, but I've had them for 8 years now. So I guess that's worth it.
Yeah, you come to Texas, you got to get yourself a pair of boots, right?
Right.
What about the most expensive meal out that you paid for?
Went to a nice restaurant in Bogota, Colombia. That was $250 for 2 people. So I'd say about $250 is the most I've paid for a meal.
Okay. What about the most expensive car or experience or toy?
Car. So I don't really have an expensive car. Bought a used Ford C-Max for $10,000 and just driving that around. That's basically like a Prius. It's a hybrid. Experience. I do travel a lot. I do spend a lot on travel, but I see it more as a value standpoint because I do use a lot of points from credit cards to travel hack. But I just came back from an Asia trip, actually a 6-week trip. And that was probably the most expensive trip I've taken.
Do you know how much you spent for 6 weeks in Asia?
I spent just above $18,000. But this was for a 6-week, 42 days. And it was about 10 flights in first class or business class. And then basically almost all luxury hotels as well. But most of it was points. If I didn't spend points, I did the math. If I paid everything cash, it would have been about like $80,000 for the whole trip. But I spent $18,000, so I see it more of as a value standpoint than total cost spent.
It's a pretty good deal. 25% off for everything you got there. If you spent 18 grand, it would have been 80.
Right.
Nice. Or 75% off. Sorry.
Yeah.
What's a key lesson you learned from childhood?
I'd say punctuality, being on time, and I learned that in high school. I was playing volleyball, and the coach was very strict on being on time, and being early was being on time, being on time was being late. And I think that's transferred through to business and to everything I do, and I think that's helped a lot as well.
What's the dumbest thing you ever wasted money on?
So like I said, I used to do some videography, photography hobby. I bought a microphone for my camera one time. It was a $900 microphone. And I think I ended up only using it like once or twice. and then it sat for several years, and I sold it maybe last year for like less than half the price on eBay. So yeah, that was a pretty bad decision.
Okay. What's something you spent way too much money on, but you don't regret?
I'd say travel, anything health and travel related. So if I spend quite a bit more on groceries for, higher quality groceries. And like I said, that Asia trip, that was expensive. 18 grand is definitely expensive, but don't regret it.
How did you make your first buck?
My first like real, W-2-ish type of job was an internship in college. I'd say my junior year of college, I did an internship with a chemical plastics company. And I was making 25 an hour.
Okay. You do anything to earn money as a kid before college at all?
I think the earliest I
Teenager?
can think of was probably middle school. I think eighth grade. Over the summer, I was an umpire for like Little League baseball. So that was my first, I guess, make a buck, like an official check from someone that's not like, my parents paying me for chores.
All right. All right. That's nice. Umpire. I like it.
I was a pretty bad
Uh,
umpire.
what's the craziest thing you've ever done to earn money?
Craziest thing, I'd say I had one real estate deal where one of the heirs of the property was in jail. And so I had to drive to the actual county jail to try to get signatures to get the deal done. And then it's ended up not going through with title issues. But yeah, I'd say driving to jail, meeting him, and through the window, think, hey, I need you to sign this, I need you to sign that to sell the property.
That is pretty wild. So, real quick follow up on that. Did he know that he was going to be signing those papers? Did you have communication with him while he was in jail? That he
Yeah,
trying to buy this property, or
they got phone calls. It was, it wasn't like a maximum security prison. I guess it was more like a county jail kind of thing.
okay?
But yeah, we talked on the phone several times, and of course, he didn't care for the property. He's like, yeah, sell it. I just want some money. And he had, like, I think his sister was also on. It was a probate where the parents passed away, and they both had to sign off on it. So yeah, so he was all in for selling it. It just ended up having some title issues that the sister wouldn't, help fix, and it fell through.
So you almost earned money on it, but not
Yeah,
quite.
yeah. I'd say yeah, almost made money. That's kind of what I say is the craziest thing I've done.
Try to get a buck.
Yeah,
Nice. What's a closely held belief that you once had that you recently changed your mind on?
I'd say it's the 401k thing. I used to think, hey, it's better to control your own money and stuff you can touch and your own investments. But now looking back, I probably say would have won the 401k. So I know I put a lot more now in my solo 401k, but I would say I used to be very gung ho. Hey, just real estate, forget the 401k. And now I've kind of shifted my tune on that.
Okay. What is the biggest change that you've gone through, whether it's financial or other, since becoming a millionaire?
I wouldn't say there was a much of a big change. As for my situation, most of it is in equity, and equity really isn't anything until you realize it. So for me, I still kept living as, hey, I don't have that money. Just because on paper I have equity in a property, it's not like if you stocks, 401k, or bonds. I mean, where it's more liquid. I've always been in the mindset, hey, this money doesn't really count. It's just fake money, the equity. So I've never really changed much on my habits. I guess just continue to be frugal, continue to save. Yeah.
Cool. You've mentioned travel and you've mentioned quality or higher quality food. So what's your third favorite thing to spend money on?
Man, I'd say since I used to do some videography, it's just like camera stuff. I bought like a new Sony camera before the Asia trip, and that was a couple grand just for the camera. So I'd say camera stuff, but then I do make some content for, social media on real estate and stuff. So ends up being a tax write-off to offset some of it. But I'd say spending money on camera gear is, as you can see from my $900 microphone I never used. So
Okay. Is there any bucket list experience or anything that's on your list that you're looking forward to here in the next little bit?
maybe in a couple years, I want to do just more traveling, just more places I haven't been to yet. Kind of be the bucket list. Maybe safari in Africa or something like that.
Awesome. Any last words of advice for somebody who's just starting out on their journey?
Yeah, I would say if you're doing something that scares you, you know that you're on the right path and you're growing. Because I think I look back and all the times where I've made big leaps of progress are times when I was really scared. Like when I bought that first house for 17K, I was so anxious I couldn't sleep for like 2 days because, my first deal, if I lost the money, I lose my friend's money. So couldn't sleep at night. But that first deal, set the trajectory for my real estate investing. Same thing when I bought that first apartment complex, and anything that was a major or big step in my real estate career was a lot of fear. But looking back, it helped me grow exponentially after that event or that thing had passed.
Austin, that's Adriel with a net worth of $1.8 to $2.2 million. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Jace.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Jace Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website, millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.